Well, thanks for the opportunity to present our Take Back Manufacturing initiative to you, as it is an imperative for Western economies. And first of all, I'll introduce myself, and then I'll start to talk about the journey that we've been on with Take Back Manufacturing. Uh, I'm based in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, which is the home of the Ford Motor Company. We have a large manufacturing facility here. We're 40 miles from Toronto, which is the fourth largest city in North America. And looking forward to explaining to you how both Canada and the US are very coupled in terms of their manufacturing base. I'm going to go through this agenda. I'm going to obviously introduce us to what we're about, and also the TBM book. Then we'll get into the history of what happened to our manufacturing and how things changed over time, and how reshoring is now a status and a driver for our new economy, and also how the ingredients are necessary, including a very important one called Industry 4.0, which will assist in the reshoring journey. I'll also summarize the Take Back Manufacturing imperatives and also cover just what's happening right now with the discussions about the USMCA trade bloc. So first of all, about me, I've been in manufacturing a long time. I started out as an apprentice in England in the aerospace industry and came to Canada to work in aerospace, and moved very quickly to the electronics industry and was in Motorola in the 80s, which was a place to be for a lot of the high-tech activity, and then moved off to start a career as a lean consultant. And also, since then, I've done a lot of different things, which I'll get into, I'll explain. But obviously, as I started work as a lean consultant, first thing we did was write a book in the early 90s. And it was very, very much a book that was read by business leaders at the time. Lean thinking was definitely where it was at in the early 90s. We were very much coupled at concerned about productivity in the 90s in North America. And of course, as a consultant, I had the opportunity to pretty much do soup to nuts in terms of the different industries, everything from where I grew up, which was electronic assembly, the food industry, the pharmaceuticals, steel making, automotive, back to aerospace, the oil and gas industry, just about everything you can think of, whiskey distilling, just about everything that was manufactured, or even the service industries, we had a look at, and did some lean thinking training, education, and consulting for clients. Did that across the international spectrum: Canada, USA, Mexico, did quite a bit in China, and also the Baltic states, Ukraine, Moldova, Turkey, etc. And so a great fun time in moving around the globe, preaching the gospel of lean thinking. And then towards the end of the 90s, I was part of the NAFTA journey, running a maquiladora plant on the border of Mexico and the US, pretty much for a year or two, getting product made in Mexico and moving product to Mexico. And then in 2004, I was asked to go to China and as a joint venture coordinator and start up manufacturing in China for quite a few North American clients. Now, there's a lot of pretty things and people in China, but manufacturing in China in 2004 wasn't one of them. We had to work hard to get quality and delivery and pretty much all of the logistical stuff in place so that we could have a successful manufacturing capability. Here's a product set that we were working on, mostly components for off-road vehicles, John Deere tractors, John Deere equipment, just about everything that was necessary for the manufacture of off-road vehicles, predominantly metal and plastic parts. After a while, we built strong teams in China. We had a very good success rate of new product production. Made a lot of friends, signed a lot of contracts, and then I came home to understand that I'd been part of the journey of hollowing out our manufacturing base in North America, specifically in Ontario, where I grew up and where I lived. Realized that this was a North American-wide problem, not just a Canadian problem. And across the board in North America, we'd hollowed out a lot of our manufacturing base. And that was the initiative and the impetus for Take Back Manufacturing. A bunch of us got together, kind of a grandiose idea, and decided to start a forum dedicated to the restoration of our manufacturing sectors. And we did that as part of the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. We presented and launched at the 2011 large trade show in Canada, in Toronto, and had a lot of support, a lot of media attention for what we were talking about over the years. Done a lot of work with the various institutions that supported manufacturing. Got a lot of attention span in the news media, and also hooked up with the reshoring initiative in the U.S. And we've been a combined operation for some time. And that was really when towards the end of that journey, is when I started to decide that we should take what we've learned in the last decade, and write a book on the subject. And so we published in 2022 all of the things we'd learned about take back manufacturing, and how it had destroyed our manufacturing capability, how we'd undermined our prosperity in North America. The book really it's a sort of tour de force of the history of what went wrong, what needs to change, what the recovery plan should be, and the kind of policies that would probably be the right thing to do to get to a strong recovery of our manufacturing sectors. And we didn't pull any punches. We talked about all the things that were wrong. Some of the topics were a little controversial, but we didn't hold back. We wanted it to be plain in sight as to the issues that we'd had and were having with our manufacturing base. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened to manufacturing. Let's do some history. And the first thing to tell you is that what was behind the destruction of our manufacturing base was liberalized global free trade. This kicked in as we started to move into the late 80s. And it was driven, in our opinion, by erroneous economic concepts and geopolitical leanings towards global free trade. I think the economists slept through the course on lean. It was quite obvious that we've gone backwards in terms of a lean supply chain. We've extended our supply chains. They've got longer. They got more expensive. And quite frankly, we've disadvantaged ourselves in terms of being just in time to the marketplace. And they forced a lot of waste, as I've said, back into the business process by being long supply chains. So we moved a lot of stuff offshore for low-cost labor rates. It was almost herd behavior in a lot of ways, and this was predominantly started to kick in and become a major issue in the early 2000s. We consider it to be uncontrolled trade. We lost about 20% of our manufacturing intensity from about 2000 to 2017. If you look at those gravestones, you probably may have grown up in some of those industries, and they now are either a shadow of their former self or don't even exist in North America, pretty much as manufacturing entities. The badges may still be on the product, but they're made somewhere else. So we saw about a 20% reduction in manufacturing intensity. It kicked in around about 2000 in most industries, and that's when China really started to gear up, and that's about when I was starting to move there and help with the journey. And I was if you remember, I was in the electronics industry in Mexico, and we were cooking. And by about mid 2000s, those plants were all closed in Mexico. So all that work we put in moving stuff to Mexico was reversed by pushing that stuff to China. So first we lost the products, and these numbers are kind of almost correct. We lost a lot of our computerization products. Go down the list, you'll see a lot of stuff that pharmaceuticals were moved out, textiles, footwear. We lost a lot of stuff. Not only do we lose the products, but we also lost the infrastructure that went with it. So you'd be amazed how much of the products can't even be tested here anymore. You may run into that. We've lost not only equipment for manufacturing, a lot of the manufacturing equipment, the next generation of equipment is now also made in China or in Asia, because that's where the manufacturing is. And wherever the manufacturing is attracts the expertise to manufacture. We lost a lot of manufacturing technology, the testing facilities, and also eventually in some sectors, both the R&D and prototyping capability, which is a biggie, and also the whole development mandate. So in some industries, you go to China for the R&D. You haven't got any onshore capability whatsoever. Certainly in the last, until like probably the last 3 or 4 years. In Canada, I mean, I'm going to use Canada, but quite frankly, it's very similar in certain states. We lost half a million jobs in 6 years before the crash. This is before 2008. We lost about, a good 25% of our workforce, all our small manufacturers, about 10,000 plants were closed. Um, people were redeployed part-time and lower paying service jobs. Um, and this is, this was pretty rough. I mean, this was a huge turnover of people. Fortunately, at the same time, our oil and gas business was booming, so a lot of people were redeployed halfway across the country to assist with that growth, but that didn't offset the significant number of jobs we lost. We also killed a generation of youth employment. I had 1 million young Canadians at that particular point underemployed, and they stayed at school. They just went and got that master's degree to chase that elusive job, and that's true. We got double-digit youth unemployment, as you do in some parts of the U.S. as well, and the participation rate for youth is hugely small. So this is a problem. We end up with an industrial rust belt. We talk about, the northeastern states being an industrial rust belt. We have those in Canada too. It's called Ontario. And so these are Canadian manufacturing numbers only. So this is the economy in Canada with just a manufacturing component. And we've seen a 10 times worsening of our trade deficit in the manufacturing arena. We've lost 20% of our domestic share of the goods we buy. We now buy 20% less that we make. We got 50% decline in our global share, which is obvious. And then you look at trade balance across different countries, certainly it's out of balance with countries that have got their own manufacturing capability, such as China. So it's pretty dismal, pretty big change from where we were, say, pre-2000. And that shows in the economy in terms of the debt and the declining prosperity and productivity. And so, we are significantly poorer in Canada than we were 20 years ago, significantly. And it shows in terms of the actual investment value. So the investment is down in pretty much every sector. And these numbers, we've lost, not only we lost overall investment in the country, but our share in the manufacturing sectors is significantly declined. We've put most of our money into housing, which unfortunately has boomed our housing market, so nobody can afford to buy a house anymore. The U.S. is not much different. Depends on which part of the U.S. you're in. But it started in the 90s. Started to see a decline in the balance of a trade deficit. It picked up a bit with the energy products, which was a shale revolution. The shale revolution helped, but you still have that cumulative trade deficit. That area under the curve is now 50% of your GDP, and not really getting much better. And then there's Canadian. We've always had a positive Canadian trade balance with our resource sectors. Even that's trending negative now. We've lost that opportunity to say so. Both sides of the border now got a trade imbalance. In some cases, in double digits. So the way to look at it is that since 1980, global trade has increased 8 times. Not trade, but global trade 8 times. But the global wealth measured, by the UN is only 3 times. So, and it's flatlined in the West. I mean, we flatlined or worse in terms of wealth. So you could say that it's been a great transfer. It's not been a great transfer of wealth, but it's been a transfer of wealth from us to the rest. It's not been a wealth generator. It's been a wealth transfer machine. And so that's really the story, and then you take a look at the U.S. production decline. The top left, you can see around about 2000, you started to lose the manufacturing capability, started to shift it. And then you can see the share of manufacturing has declined significantly, just like in Canada. And debt and youth participation is going in the wrong direction. And so that's both sides of the border have the same signature. The US is actually less worse than Canada. Canada's even more severe because we're a smaller country and therefore the damage was greater. You know, it was a bigger chunk. This is straight out of the book. Everybody knows about automobiles, so I just take one supply chain, which is your automobile industry. There's the bill of material for the parts for the car. There's where they're made. They're made all over the world. Significant globalized manufacturing activities. The numbers show that only 58%, this is for a North American make car, you know, like a GM or a Ford, only 58% is value added in the USMCA. Okay, and it's even lower for labor content. If you then take what we buy, which is the estimated market value, and only 46% of what we buy is locally assembled. Okay, the rest is offshore purchased complete. So what that means is only 27% of the car you drive down the road is manufactured in North America. And that's the auto industry. Look at the aerospace industry, which I grew up in, and it's even worse. It's been offshored and deintegrated from a manufacturing point of view. And that's why Boeing and some of the big guys are not making any money. They've got their manufacturing spread all over the globe, and it's expensive to do that, and it takes longer, and it's just not good business. And so the 787 was a disaster in terms of how it went together. Not only was it a long journey to get those parts together, there were mistakes made between the infrastructural systems between parts. So it was a disaster. Um, Not just manufacturing. You start looking at the other sides of the economy. Take service jobs, which everybody says, well, you know, manufacturing jobs are mobile. Well, service jobs are also very mobile. Um, and yeah, we've probably 40% of them were automated out. You know, we put computers into the workforce, into the white collar spaces, but the rest, 60%, they're still there. They're not eliminated. They're relocated offshore. And of course, technology allowed us to do that with computerization and networks, etc. So we've lost not only our manufacturing jobs, but a lot of our infrastructural white collar jobs as well. So I was going to ask for questions, but if you don't have any, I'll keep going. I just wanted, if anybody really has a burning question, I can take it. That is a summary of the history. Everybody okay?
If anybody has questions, feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Or just yell
Uh,
out, just tell me, just if you got a
Derek's
question.
got a question.
What is your thought with AI playing into all this?
I'm going to cover that.
Okay, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah, I try to just give you history. So those numbers are pretty dismal. You would probably, you know, if you lived through this stuff, if you did, you get exactly the message I'm giving, which is that it was, you know, nothing happened. I mean, when me and Ron were in the SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, it was a tough, you know, it was tough. There was a lot of layoffs, a lot of closures. Um, you know, those years were tough years.
Now, I've been there. I've been to your plant also up there where you
Yeah,
live. Yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah,
Ford plant.
yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah, there used to be all down that the main highway. There used to be facilities manufacturing and feeding that plant. They're all gone. Okay, all those feeder plants have been offshored.
just
Not
just a
all of
quick.
them, but some of them.
Oh,
Go ahead,
excuse.
Ron.
Sorry, just a quick comment. You gave some Canadian statistics, but in the 2008 2009 time frame, up for the first 9 years in the U.S., they lost something like 3.5 million manufacturing jobs and 25,000 closings, uh, business closings in that period of time. So
Right.
U.S. got hit hard too. And then uh, what Canada's gone through since 2009, we were at parity as far as our average income in manufacturing compared to the United States, and now the average income in Canada is $22,000 US less per year than what people are earning in the U.S. So Canada's had a market decline over the U.S. in the past 10 years.
Yeah, the way to put it is that both sides of the border got hit. We got hit really severely because our plants were small and they were just closed, whereas in the US, the plants were bigger and they went to one shift instead of two. So there was a lot more infrastructural damage in a smaller community in Canada from a manufacturing point of view, and it showed in the numbers as well. Right? I mean, 500,000 in our population is, you know, smaller ratio than the numbers Ron just gave you for the US. So you were more boistered. You had a larger economy, therefore you weren't hit as hard as Canada was hit really hard. Okay, anybody all right? I'll keep going. I got a lot to do. Okay, so there's where we are. Let's assume this is, you know, 2010 or 2011. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's the next piece. And what we did, and this is Boston Consulting Group, Harry Moser's group, and I was involved a little bit. And we did what we consider to be the biggest lean study of all time, because we compared onshore versus offshore supply chain costs. And you know, if you look at a globalized manufacturing, it's a bunch of ships moving stuff around the globe, you know, taking materials from one place and adding value and then taking it to a customer in these waste machines. There's no manufacturing done on these puppies. It's just to move inventory around in using very expensive bunker fuel and adding a lot of pollution. Now these things each container on these things docks every 3 seconds into the USMCA. And not many people know this, but all of the 11,000 transport ships pollute 6 times more than all of the non-diesel cars on the planet in terms of the ocean. Okay, so they're very dirty, and they constitute 90% of our global trade. So these container ships are a necessary integral part of global manufacturing, but they're not friendly to not only the environment, but to the waste factor. And of course, we're going to show you next why. If you look at a typical global supply chain, you know, there you got, you know, Canada and the US, we're taking raw materials and shipping them, say, to China. There's all the ships. They're going both directions. There's a lot of cost drivers. You take the bottom left, those are real numbers. The top right is the very simple process flow. Bits in red are the non-value added steps. And that, by the way, it worked real good when interest rates were nice and low, and now interest rates are popping higher, and they should be higher for investment. You're going to have a lot of inventory costs trapped in these supply chains, and that's what a lot of the corporations are seeing. They're seeing interest rates going up, the inherent waste in the supply chain, and are reacting accordingly. And so what we're finding also is that the offshore manufacturing facilities are getting better, in fairness, but ecologically they've been a challenge. They're not set up to with standards to meet the same cleanliness of manufacturing that we have in North America, and it shows in their pollution. And so free trade has increased pollution, no question. So if we take a look at this global supply chain and rethink it, based on the fact we've got higher interest rates, then you would start to move it back to a more localized trade block. And if you look at those numbers in the bottom, they're gone down by, you know, the supply chain costs have gone down by an order of magnitude, 10 to 6 times. And now we've localized manufacturing, so stronger incubator for innovation, shorter supply chains, faster response to customers. We still trade on a balanced basis. We still ship out raw resources for countries that need them for their own economies. Knowledge trade, which is IP, should be better controlled. We've lost a lot of, when I was in China, I was walking around the plant with 6 young engineers following me, learning everything I did. Okay. So our IP was given away. We didn't make any money in the transaction on IP. It was just part of the deal to actually get them to manufacture for us. So what happened in around 2012 is we started running numbers and found out that we were going to be at a tipping point on some commodities by 2015. And this was Boston Consulting Group led this, and they came up with what they call a balanced landed cost parity model that said that, you know, pretty much everybody but everything offshore, India, China, would be at parity by 2015. Now, this doesn't allow for the sunk capital that's already invested offshore. So it doesn't mean that we immediately spring back into reshoring because there's a lot of sunk costs. But if you run the numbers, the balance that what's called a tipping point has been reached on many commodities. Okay, so now today, if you go look at the documents, 80% plus of the corporations are now looking to reshore to North America. As I said, subject to recapitalization constraints. It takes time for the capital to be replaceable or for the product set to change or the technology to change enough that the capitalization has to be recycled. But it's happening. So there is now an advantage for localized manufacturing, and that's without the political forcing that might take place. This is purely running numbers and looking at the economics of a onshore versus offshore environment. So, you know, the sort of byword is make much more of what you consume with much more of your own resources. That is really much more lean thinking, a lot more palatable for your economy. And it's in fact leaner and greener as far as the economy is concerned. And so this, you know, it just shows that there's a lot of things pushing us away from liberalized global trade back towards regional trade blocs. It's taking time. We've already discussed the business initiatives, you know, the fact that it's at the tipping point. But there's now political driven initiatives saying, you know, maybe we should be employing our people and having our own economy benefiting from our manufacturing than somebody else. And so that's pushing us towards a more localized trade bloc environment. Taken a long time. You know, it's been 30 something years where we've been talking and worrying about this, and it's only now just beginning to happen. Of course, this means that the reshoring is going to take time because of local recapitalization. In some industries, I can go into them, but some industries are already at that point, and we're seeing, you know, new plants being built because they would have been built anyway, but they're being built locally rather than offshore. Some of the infrastructure needs to take place. You know, we've not spent the money on our infrastructure, and that's going to have to be part of the reshoring initiative. And quite frankly, we've got people that have forgotten how to make things anymore. So we got to retrain people on how to be manufacturers again. Big job. So just to put it in perspective, these long global supply chains are wasteful, and it's kind of intuitive if you look at it. Here's all the kinds of inventories that the accounting world puts together, and they say it's an asset, which is laughable. It's actually a waste. I always have arguments with accountants over this, but inventory is not an asset in anybody's language. It should be classed as a waste. And it's certainly not value added. So if you look at the long supply chain, those are all the classes of inventory where they kind of happen in the supply chain. And we've also got all the transactional activities of borders to cross and customs to pay and all the other good, and the ships to move. And so there's only a couple that really add any value. The rest are waste. And so when you go to a short supply chain, you actually eliminate a significant amount of those inventory classes. And you now have a shorter supply chain, less inventory, less waste. And those show in the numbers every time you run the numbers between the two. So here's the advantages of shorter, local, and less complex supply chains. And these are real parameters you can put numbers to. Okay, and there's a lot to talk about. Intuitive, but it's amazing how we did this to ourselves and actually extended our supply chains with globalized manufacturing when we should have known they were wasteful. And we're paying for that. You pay for that stuff. Now, here's another way to draw the same problem. There's all the things you would do in a global supply chain to get it done. And then the things on the right is a much shorter list. And we're talking big percentages in terms of benefits, in terms of waste factors. So another way to look at it, we used to, in the 70s, bring material in because we didn't have the indigenous material. and then we would add value to our and convert the material into products for our customers. But what we did in early 2000 plus was we moved the value add to where the materials were and generated a whole bunch more transactions and ships to bring it in, and made it a lot worse. So the other thing that came very clear to some of us is that there is an enigma of manufacturing location. If you look on the right and you take what now is a Rust Belt, which is the Great Lakes zone, we have vast fresh water. What does manufacturing use a lot of? Certainly heavy industry, water. We need clean energy. Well, we got local clean energy, cleaner than coal, which is what China uses. We got a lot of wood, steel resources, plenty of mid-cost labor, certainly if you go to Mexico, and significant local consumers, larger consumer base. So why do we take it to China? They don't have very much fresh water. They have no clean energy. They don't have much wood, or some of the steel has to be imported from Japan. Plenty of low-cost labor, though. And they're still building a local consumer base. So go back 20 years, it didn't make any sense at all. It was not sensible. So, why do we give up our manufacturing when it was obvious that we had more capability locally? Right? And the answer is, it was politics to try to grow in somebody else's economy so that we could actually share in the growth of that economy. So, any questions so far? So here's the reshoring story. And these are numbers. These are sort of classical numbers. I'm not putting any numbers on here, but they're kind of right in terms of the scale. And when I was in China coming back from China in 2010, we were on paper seeing supposed to see a 25% advantage in being offshore rather than local. By 2015, when we reran the numbers, got probably a little bit more clarity on the numbers, we were just at the tipping point. And labor, overhead, materials, cost of poor quality, logistical costs, and the support and environmental costs, which are bigger than we thought. And all these costs were increasing. As we were moving through that decade, we were seeing labor costs in China going up, the reality of certain support costs going up, and even material prices going up, quite frankly, as their economy grew. So we were already at the tipping point by 2015, which is what Boston Consulting and the rest of us figured. Now that would be on things that we had a lot of labor content. Okay, so even with low-cost labor, we were at the tipping point. So you now look at 2020, we now see in some commodities, furniture, for example, 15% advantage in being local. We've got plenty of wood. We're not going to hold in it as far as furniture is concerned. And then in 2025, even with or without tariffs, we've got a 15-point advantage. So it's flipped from 25% advantage offshore to about 10 to 15% advantage in being local on the numbers. So that's real. And it's not hard to see if you want to take a fridge and an iPhone and you look at where we were in 2012, fridges were being made offshore, what they call white products, fridges, stoves, that kind of stuff. And yeah, iPhones, high value, fairly high value, not high value in relation to a fridge, but small and medium-sized value. Fridge, higher value, but very bulky. A lot of product cubic volume. So when you run the numbers on cubic volume versus value, by 2015, GE was bringing back all its white products, as well as large components for things like Caterpillar tractors and John Deere vehicles. Excavators and tractors were all coming back and being locally manufactured because the cost of shipping with that bulk and that volume was too much. iPhones, which were high value but small size, were staying offshore. Now, if you go to 2025, maybe not an iPhone, but some of the computer and network products are now coming back. Even those don't make any sense to be offshore. So we're seeing we've gone from one to the other. We've actually got to the point now where most of the stuff that was offshore is not making any more sense, whatever size or cost it is on this gradient. So the 2022 report from Thomas Industries, and it's been updated, it's going to be another report in another month. 85% of corporations are pursuing a reshoring strategy. We've brought back, this is US numbers, 364,000 reshoring jobs, which is up by 53% in 1 year. So there's much more to do, but reshoring is happening, and it's happening not just in one industry, but quite a few different industries. And if you look at this is a kind of a prediction of the kinds of industry sectors that if furniture is up there. We've gone from 50% to 80% of assembly. The components are still a challenge because there's a lot of castings that are made in China. The handles and hinges, that takes time for the capitalization to wear through. But furniture is really coming back really strong. Electronic products, some of it. Appliances pretty high already, and so on. Even things like food is coming back. Automotive takes time. EV and hybrids helping, but in general, it's actually moving fast towards localized assembly. So it's good news. A lot of reshoring opportunity in the USMCA environment. Now, that may not be Canada. It might be Mexico. But it doesn't matter. It's still on shore, and it feeds into the economy pretty good. But I must admit that, quite a lot of the installed base for some of these products was already in Mexico. We did that in the 90s, and it's just being reversed back into Mexico from where we were in the late 90s. So the advantages of reshoring, reasons for reshoring are obvious. Shorter supply chains. We're already at landed cost tipping point. Less inventory, shorter lead times, which is money. In the same time zone and culture helps, and so on. There's a lot of other inducements that government can bring to the party. But even if you had no government advantage, you'd still be reshoring because of the logistical costs of the supply chain. There are some challenges. We got to rebuild our capability. We've lost some capability locally. By the way, China has been manufacturing stuff now for 25 years. They've got good at it. They're a good competitor. So going to take a while to displace that competitive capability with our own. And that's a challenge. So we just can't snap our fingers. We need to rebuild our capability. So here's some stuff from Thomas. I got some links here, which when I give it to you, you can have a look. It supports the 83% and the 27% in terms of the amount of pursuing of reshoring. More than half are investing in Industry 4, which I'm going to talk about next. So what's happening is it's not just the same old product and the same old technology coming back. It's new products, new technology, and that's what we got to talk about next. So yeah, if you're running a business and you're offshoring it, you should be running the numbers right now. And if you're buying product from somebody, you got to ask them the question, are you running the numbers on whether you can do it locally? Because it's theoretically where they're going to go. Okay. Reshoring should happen, but there are some cases where it's going to take some sticky stuff, where it's going to take some time for the capitalization cycle to be in the right place. And obviously, there's a lot of great competitors in China. I mean, I still go back and forth occasionally. It's going to take a while to displace them. You're not going to move something from somebody that's doing a good job unless you've got somebody equally good locally to give it to. But the trends are going in the right direction. We're seeing labor cost deltas dropping, and I'll talk about why it's dropping even more with Industry 4 in a second. And our supply chain costs are still going up. So it's reversing from an advantage offshore in 2000 to an advantage onshore by 2030 for sure. And that's being driven also by increasing interest rates. So let me just tell you a little bit about this Industry 4 thing. If we bring a new product with new technology back and we do Industry 4, And if you think about what's the advantage of going offshore? Why would you go offshore when you've got the extra cost of that supply chain? And you're going to tell me on a level playing field with no investment, well, it's labor's cheaper. But if we reduce the content of the labor, the differential of labor content, the advantage of labor is even lower. There's no advantage if you've got less labor. It doesn't offset the actual cost of the supply chain. And this is exactly what the balanced sourcing model is telling us when we start to take our labor content down. So if we start to reduce our labor content from, I'm talking overall, not just direct shop floor labor, I'm talking the overall labor content across the board, the whole labor effort content in the business, and we reduce it by 40%, okay? So if this labor effort is lowered with lean and industry 4.0, then we're going to have less labor differential between the low-cost labor offshore and the normal level of labor onshore, and then offset against the supply differential of supply chains. And the numbers run. And so it shows that in many cases, new product, new technology, industry 4, even more so, the tipping point works for onshore. And we're talking about a 50% reduction in the cost of labor by employing Industry 4.0. That's how drastic it is. And so that obviously knocks a hole in the idea that, you know, you can take a $20 job and compare it to what used to be a $2 job in China, which is now actually $6. So even the differential has gone up from where we used to be. We flatlined in our labor costs. And China's increased its labor costs by about 3 times in the last decade. And so the numbers run. So with Industry 4 as an extra booster, we are definitely in a reshoring mode. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Will these slides be available, or we got to take pictures
Yeah,
of all these slides?
I'll put them in PDF and send them to Don. You can have them all.
Right.
And this, I just want to comment that this is fantastic because of the fact that most people do emphasize on the labor side, but didn't recognize all of the other
You're dead right. In
factors.
fact, even the universities aren't, you know, I'm addressing university students in their final year of accounting, and they're still being told that labor differential is all that matters. It's
Second,
disgusting.
yeah. Second question is that I know that probably Canada, because of the, you know, and Mexico, of course, the labor is a lot lower.
Mm.
But say we're working more on the Canadian side, what is the differential between the U.S. labor rates and Canada, for example?
Depends on the industry, but you know, we used to be pretty close to parity, but recently because of our dollar, you know, what's changed is not so much the labor productivity, that's for sure. Our labor productivity's got worse, but our dollars helped. So our dollars dropped and made our labor cheaper. So we're, as Ron mentioned, we're talking about a, you know, 15%, 10 to 15% differential. And so yeah, our labor would be cheaper, but we've got a lot of we've got a lot more tax, and we've got you know, a higher cost of labor in terms of support costs, you know, health and safety. Our energy costs in some parts of Canada are way higher than some parts of the US. So it's not just labor, there's other factors as well. I've got numbers on that if you want them. I didn't put them in this presentation. They're in the book, but they're, of course, they're a moving target. But if you're really interested, I probably got a slide that's not too far out of date you can get. We're cheaper, but cheaper on direct labor, but there's other hidden costs that push us in the wrong direction. And Mexico's about only about 25% more than China on labor now. Okay.
Well, it's going to be 25% more again.
Well, yeah, let's not go there. I'm gonna cover that a little bit later anyway. I can't resist the opportunity then to talk about it. But
And just a quick PSA to everybody, hang with us to the end of questions, because I have a special treat for everybody. We have a local small manufacturer that's located in Kentucky, and I want to just kind of give everybody a real in real life view of what reshoring and manufacturing in locally in North America looks like. So hang on to the end till after questions for that.
yeah,
So,
I've got a lot of
We've,
I got a lot of stories of people that brought stuff back from back from China already. But
wow.
I didn't. Yeah, I got quite a few. But bottom line, answering the question, Mexico is still the lowest cost region, and that's what. But it makes sense to put it there because they've got a growing population. There's other thing when you're a business leader deciding where to put a plant, you're going to put it in the southern states or Mexico, no question, right? But
yeah.
that doesn't mean to say that's where you will put it. You're going to look at where your customers are as well. More complicated. But so the first rule of engagement is it's coming home. We're not quite sure which part of our home it's going to come to. Okay, that's the open question.
Can I
Um,
make
Good
a
deal.
can I make a comment, Nigel?
no, you can't, Ron. You've already had two already. Go ahead.
All right. Nigel works on a true cost method analysis approach. So if you really wanted to find out what it's going to cost to bring it back, as opposed to keeping it over there, Nigel has all the tools to enable you to uh, get an answer from him. So just thought I'd mention
Yeah.
that to you.
Yeah, I'm plugged in with
Excellent.
Harry Moser from the Reshoring Initiative, and we got a common. I've got a model I use that's, I use his model now because I've fed it forever with information. So anyway, you know that it's not hard to do the numbers. It's necessary to run the numbers, and some of it's easy. You don't need to go too far before you get the right answer, but you must run the numbers. You can't just assume it's the right thing for you to do. Okay,
We've also got three more questions.
go ahead.
Larry, go for it. You are muted at the moment, Larry, by the way. You're still muted. There we go. Nope, nope. You had it and then you lost it. Go for it again. There we go.
I was going to make a
Larry.
comment. I was involved with the appliance industry, supporting some major plants in Michigan, and we had product coming in from Austria, Mexico, and China. And it's amazing the cost that you run into and the hidden cost.
Right.
It becomes very real when you get a container or a truckload product in that's defective. One, you got to sort it. Two, if they're playing the game that this is quote just-in-time manufacturing, you may send a whole line home at one of the biggest dishwasher plants in the country,
Agreed.
or one of the biggest mixer plants in the country. Just
Agreed.
because you don't have any parts, because the parts that came in were bad, and now somebody's got to try to rework them in the States, and they've got to somehow get new parts here, which may end up things may be coming by air instead of by ship. Um, so
We never flew any parts. I was in China 7 years. At one point, I was shipping 55 40 footers a week across 3 different plants into
but
about.
the problem is when you get bad parts in
Oh
from
no, I agree. I totally agree. What I was going to say was all of, I was being facetious. Of course we flew parts. Of course we had bad parts. Okay. I mean, I mean, it was a zoo. I mean, and it was a zoo for a long time. And it took a while for us to run the numbers and realize just how bad our decision process was. And it wasn't that the people at the other end weren't trying. It's just that they were, I mean, if you're a local, here's the big thing. If your plant was down the street and you had that kind of quality, you'd bring them in.
Yeah.
You'd have a bit of a discussion, and the problem, and you send some of your people there, and you could solve it in an afternoon. It took weeks to solve a similar problem between the two countries, different time zone, different culture, different language, and you just couldn't jump in a car and drive and see them. And so,
Exactly.
and it sounds, of course you could fly 12 hours and go see them, but that alone was a big deal. And there was a lot of hidden cost and cost of quality. There was as you said, cost of flying stuff. I've flown more stuff than I flew stuff. I sat under stuff I had to bring in by air. It's just long supply chain business. Not cool.
Yeah.
Not cool. Even if you got a good guy at the other end, it's not cool. No
I'll
disrespect.
make one other comment.
Yeah.
About 25 years ago, there was a banner at the train station in Shenzhen, China, selling product for below cost. And the Chinese government subsidized manufacturing product cost in order to steal the manufacturing business.
They still do. They still do.
Oh, yeah.
They have a reverse GST. And if you ship parts out of China today, parts, okay, you pay 17%. They get 17% back from the government. Okay. If you ship assemblies, they only get 8 or 9%. Sorry, the other way around. They get 9% for parts and 17%, 7% for parts, and 17% or 12%, I think it is now, for assemblies. What it does, it rigs the system so that they get the assembly work, right? They keep the assembly work. So if you want to buy parts from somebody in China, they don't get as much for it from the government, and therefore it's rigged so that you can't buy the parts. You can't just add your own assembly to the parts because they've already. And you want to look at electric vehicles, and we want to start building batteries here. All those materials are made in China for the batteries. They're going to rig that system. They're going to put those prices up, so we'll never be able to afford to assemble the batteries. That's clever. They're very good. They're very good at that. Okay. I don't blame them. They're very clever at business. And they're very good with their manufacturing. Don't underestimate them. They've been doing it a long time. Those young engineers that were following me around are now senior managers in those plants. They're very good. And they've bought a lot of capital. And so it's not to be underestimated. They're good competitors. It used to be a zoo. It's still difficult to do with long supply chains, but we've got better at it, unfortunately. Don't know if that helps any.
Mm, good deal.
I don't want to disrespect the competitor. I just think they're at a disadvantage because they're they're on the end of a long supply chain, and it's our disadvantage to allow that to happen. Anyway, Industry 4.0 is going to kill any issue with long supply chains. Let me show you. So, why do we need Industry 4.0 is really going to solve the labor differential problem because we're going to take a lot more labor out of our processes with Industry 4.0. Okay, so this is kind of a wordy thing. I just want to explain what Industry 4.0 is. It's really the fourth industrial revolution, and it is a revolution, and it's combining lean thinking with digital transformation. And it is a disruptive technology that we're going to have to understand. There's your artificial intelligence. I'll go through this for you. A lot of benefits in terms of competitiveness, productivity improvement. Also, it's going to improve reliability, flexibility, and capability. And businesses are planning this. There's a significant amount of industry being built around Industry 4. So let me give you a quick overview. I don't know how many of you have been through an Industry 4.0 overview, but I'm going to give it to you. It's just an overview. I've got some videos that you can look at separately. It's a big subject. So, I started when I started in the 60s. This is the kind of technology I was faced with. I did my degree with a slide rule. Hands up if you did your degree with a slide rule or went to school with a slide rule. Kind of dates you, right? But that's what we had back then. And that terrible punch card system for computers, that's what it was like in 1960. And by 1980, we were getting better. We had better tools, handhelds, and so on. And then, of course, now we got in 2000 and change, we've got, we got the cloud, we've got handhelds, very powerful computers. We got ERP systems, automated inspection. We found a way to automate most of our machinery, drive our machines with computers. But that's not Industry 4, that's still Industry 3. And people go, oh, well, yeah, I've got technology, it's Industry 4. No, sir, it's not. It's not. This is actually pre-cyber physical. This is Industry 3. And if you look, there's great technology there in most of those pictures, but there's hands in every picture. The only picture that's Industry 4 is the one on the bottom right, number D. The rest are high-tech Industry 3. So what Industry 4.0 is cyber physical systems, where you're connecting computers to the process without human intervention, which gives you that advantage to get labor removed from the process. Okay, so in a way, look at it, where I describe it, no hands, okay? And that's Industry 4. So traditionally, we've had people trapped between our systems and our process. Okay, they've been trapped trying to keep up with both. And that's Industry 3.0. They've been trapped in that process computer system. We're going to liberate them so that the Industry 4 system is connected directly to the process, and we're able to sit above that. Not everybody's going to get their feet on the table, but we're certainly going to be in a better position. And so what we're trying to do is get those processes and computers linked together. That's Industry 4.0 in a nutshell. 5 advanced technologies. I'll talk about the most important 3. And the first one is, of course, we call it, these are the technology. The first one is networks. Connectivity is what is the fancy word. Some people call it the industrial Internet of Things, but it's really everything connected together so that you've got that complete end-to-end information exchange, and things know where everybody else is. And this is growing. We've got significant growth in the marketplace in terms of, products now being able to be connected together with the network. A lot of protocols established. Some people call it advanced robotics. I call it advanced automation. It's the same automation, but with sensorization. So you've got touch and feel with the computerization. We actually have been slow at rejigging our manufacturing with new automation, because we've been more focused on long supply chains and supply chain management. But you can see an upturn now, and it's continuing to go up in terms of the capital being expended on advanced robotics, advanced automation, and using sensorization. The disadvantage of robotics was they were running a dumb program. They didn't know where the end effector was. Now they've got sensors on those end effectors. They can see exactly what they're doing, just like a human would. So they're getting human-like in one sense. Artificial intelligence, AI, some people call it big data, and we're moving from hardware, software, and knowledgeware to now what we call thoughtware. All right, so we've got now computers that can learn. They're self-learning. They can take information, vast amounts of information, real time at the point of use, operate on it, and make decisions based on subroutines that we've trained them to do. You put that together, that gives you the 3, we call them disruptive technologies to get this done. And their systems being built to take advantage of all these 3 things. On top of that, we also need these digital transformation tools and technology to be focused with lean thinking. So we still need to make sure we don't automate waste. We got to get our processes to be lean before we automate them, or we're going to end up with quite a mess. So if there's some people running around doing cyber physical, and what I'm doing, I'm a lean guy, so I'm working with them to make sure that they've got their process leaned out before they automate. And there's some programs that we've developed to actually teach them how to do that in real time. There's a whole environment now, ecosystem being built for Industry 4, where ERP is at the top with computer-aided engineering, and then at the bottom in the green is the physical process, and we're now building an infrastructure between the 2 something called a manufacturing execution system, and there's 3 subsystems that are very, very detailed. I'm not going to go through them, but I'm going to leave you with some links to a video that takes you right through this whole thing. Okay, just to give you a taste of it, though, a shop floor, which is Industry 4, there might be somebody, or it may be a person in there, might be a person. Everything they do, though, is being driven by sensorization. Everything is controlled with, everything knows where it is. The human factor has been eliminated, and basically these control tags control work orders. The machines are fully automated and sensorized, and everything that moves is being, you can track everything that moves with the new cyber physical environment, including stuff that's on a truck with a GPS tag. So these technologies are now available on the market. They're continuously being improved. Everything can be sensorized. You know, look at the list of sensors: vibration, color, air quality, humidity, light level. We've got a lot of sensorization taking place in our industries. Machines are now getting smarter. Plants are getting able to understand where their materials are at all times with these tools. So what I did, I teach part-time at a technical school, technical college. I converted the very complicated cyber physical language into these 10 combat drills. And people think it's cute because it's simple. You've got to lean it out first. So if it's waste, you eliminate it. If you can't eliminate waste, reduce it. If it adds value, integrate it. Make sure, you know, it's connected. If it's dumb, make it smart, which is possible. If it moves, track it, which is a biggie. If it needs to communicate, connect it, and so on. So you can see the Industry 4 language, even simplified, is about removing waste and getting the labor content out of the process in its design stage, so that we have considerably less labor content in what we do. Now, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about AI and its impact on our culture and our job market. And I think this is probably just as big as the horse-drawn carriage in the car in terms of how it's going to affect, or as big as the first computers we put into industry in the first place. This is a big move. There are a lot of change coming down in terms of how this is going to affect our operations. So what you get out of that is, you know, the numbers that most people run is about a 50% reduction in labor content. So you're not that worried about low-cost labor anymore. You know, what labor that's left is probably essential, and you're better to have, quite frankly, labor that's more capable so they can take care of this automation process. So you get all these reduces, all these improvements. And you know, business owners say to me, well, why would I want to do this? And I say, well, you can become a disruptor and participate, or you can be disrupted by your competitor. You choose. And that's exactly the way it used to be with lean when we first started. You know, everybody was doing it because they were scared the other guy was going to get there first. And this is exactly what's happening with Industry 4. It's cutting across many different industries, not just manufacturing, obviously logistics. Mining is big. I've got products, Industry 4 products in mining. I can give you some examples, but I got a client that's got a puck. They throw it in a pile of earth that comes out of the mine when they dig out a section of the mine, and they now know where they dug it out from, because it knows where it came from. And so they've got all kinds of tools to actually improve the efficiency of the mining process. Nuclear is a big area. Construction are using a lot of robotics in construction now, a lot of Industry 4 environments. So you can use it to control your assets. Aerospace, they used to lose jigs and fixtures to build a wing. Now they all have sensors on them and they know exactly where they are. Inventory management, transactional elimination. You can actually now remove inventory transactions from your process with this technology. Process control, obviously very good already. Global positioning, there we can now integrate it in real time. and obviously advanced sensor integration. Even safety systems become more goof-proof because we're going to sensorize people. Yeah, people will be wearing these things and we'll know where they are. So this is kind of a taste of what's coming. So again, there's a couple of videos that I've done that you can, they're about an hour and a half long. They're very detailed on Industry 4. But that's probably, if you're a young engineer starting your career as a manufacturing engineer and you don't understand the impact of Industry 4, your career is going to be severely limited. Any questions?
We've got a few. Derek, go for it.
I teach also. I teach robotics at a couple of colleges.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But I know everything you just said. I agree with to some degree about probably 80% of the things you said. But my question is the Industry 4 thing something you pay for? I'm not really sure how they come to these conclusions of this 50% reduction, because I also make a product and I get it imported from China as well. I'm not sure how I can just go to someone in the United States and say, hey, can you make this part for me? And they're going to charge, because I've tried that and they wasn't charging me the price. I know you said it's going to take a while, maybe 5 years or whatever the time,
right.
But how is that? Because most of the things you talk about, it's only to me, I'm not sure about everyone else, seems to be focused on the auto industry and industries that follow underneath the tier 2 and tier 3 auto parts and things of that nature. Everything on your screen. So I'm trying to figure out, where does the average inventor, unless they're inventing something for a car or automobile, truck, or whatever, what have you, where do they fit into this Industry 4 that you're talking about? And is that a process? Is that a program that you pay for? And then the second question, and then I'll let you go. Who decides on the combat drill that you have 10 things? How do you decide who makes the decision to get rid of it, or it's trash or stupid, or, can you go back to that slide again, please?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Who makes that
Sorry.
decision if it's dumb or, do you
Well,
make that decision? Do you ask someone else to make the decision, or?
Well, first of all,
either question, you can ask either one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the 50% thing is if you take any process and look at the labor content, it's massive, right? There's a lot of labor content. So all we're saying is you can take half the labor content out. I mean, it's not always going to be 50%, but it's a good average. And there's two ways you get it out. One is you lean it out. It naturally is wasteful already, and you take the waste out. So I'm assuming that Industry 4 includes the lean effort. So if you've got a process that's not been leaned and you lean it out, that's worth at least 25%, right? And then the automation takes out the other 25% or 30, 20, something like that. But obviously lean is a big part of the solution for Industry 4. And there's a lot of rules now about how to continuously improve a process. You've got to go through a ritual to make sure that you're not taking away important parts of your process when you take the waste out. But I think that your question was, who decides? I think that's a management / team approach within the company. And that's what continuous improvement is all about. And you set goals, you set conditions, you map it, you go through the ritual of understanding where the value added, non-value added is, and you design the process so that it's waste free, and then you decide where the value added parts are, and then you automate those, make them move quicker, or make sure there's less labor content in those value added steps. So the first step is waste elimination. And there's a lot of waste. And in some processes, it's high. I mean, some processes, 90%. It's amazing when you take a setup reduction in any plant, and unless it's been studied, and it takes an hour. Well, the value in the setup is probably only probably 10 to 15 minutes. So easiest thing for me to improve is a setup area, a setup machine, setting up a machine that's not been studied, because it's usually 75% waste. So I'd say lean is where the game is first. And then the second part of your question was, how do you get the Industry 4 components? How do you buy it? I think you take a piece of the process and you have experts come in and study it for you and tell you. Most of the machine providers, if you go to most trade shows now, in in the manufacturing arena, it doesn't matter it's metal bashing or machining or plastics or eyeglass manufacturing. I've been to them with clients and everybody's talking about Industry 4. Everybody, oh, we've got the solution for Industry 4. So the fact they're talking about it and they're trying to get their equipment to emulate the Industry 4 environment is going to drive the cost down. I don't know if that helps, but it's that kind of uh, excitement in the industry to actually get this done.
Thank you. But it's not a software. It's
a complete game. I mean, it's it's not just, it's software is not, it's the complete journey of lean and then what's called, digital transformation is the fancy name for it. But, figuring once you've got a process that's pretty lean, you can go back in and actually then add automation. So, let's say you've got an operator that's got to push a button. Why is he pushing a button? Can you eliminate that? Can it be censored? It starts as soon as the machine's there, material's there, it starts. So that's automation. So there's ways and there's tools and means to do that. Can you sense where the product is so that you can start the process, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe the other video I've got will help if you want to watch that one.
Nigel, I've got a quick question and
Go
just
ahead.
sort of a hopefully to dovetail into what Derek, well, one of the things Derek was asking.
Yeah.
And that's that where do small manufacturers kind of work into this play, you think?
Yeah, 80% of 80% of our manufacturers are small. They're in 50,000 square feet, less than 50 people. I agree. Doesn't matter I mean, if they buy capital, if they do buy okay. The first step is if they're going to buy capital, it better be an Industry 4 plan. They've got to make sure they're intelligently spending capital money on the right stuff. Is that what you're concerned about?
Yeah, or how, well, one of the things Derek was mentioning was how does if let's say a startup or a small company, and they're looking for a manufacturer. Is there a benefit sometimes to finding maybe a smaller, hungrier manufacturer?
I don't know. I mean,
stateside.
If they're gonna, you mean like a supplier? I mean, you can ask your supplier what their cost curve is, whether they're going to improve. I mean, if you just look at price, you might get the right answer, or you might not, right? I think if you're going to make a partnership with a supplier, and it's going to be a big piece of your business, you're going to sit down with them and say, well, so what's your 5-year plan? You're going to do Industry 4, you're going to continuously reduce your costs. Am I going to be able to stay with you, or are you going to have to be looking for somebody in 2 years because you run out of road? I mean, those are good questions to ask a supplier.
Sure.
And if they're big, I quite frankly don't think it's a scale problem. I think it's a mentality problem. If you're a small company and you're growing, you actually have an advantage because you are going to need capital anyway for growth. So if you intelligently buy the capital, you might be in a better position than a large company that's tapped out and they've got no more growth and they've already sunk all their money into old capital. So a startup might even be in a better position to do it right the first time.
Excellent.
Good point.
We got a question by Jennifer. Go for
Yes,
it.
Jennifer.
Or I can read it. Either way.
Yeah.
I'll read it. No worries. So, what impact do you think reviving the traditional inventor-manufacturer relationship will have on all of these issues?
You mean the inventor? How would an invent? Yeah. I think one of the things that inventors need to know more about is the limitations of any process. Like if you're designing a product, and you need to know the rules of design for manufacturability. You need to know the technological constraints of any of the materials you're using. The more you know about the limits of the technology you're going to put you into your invention, the smarter you're going to be, right? I mean, that's about sitting down with a supplier and saying, can you hold that tolerance? Is this something you can do? Am I pushing you too hard? Is it going to be, those are the questions I think inventors are going to have to keep asking anyway, whether it's automated or not, right? Um, and I think one question would be, can my product be sensorized? For example, people are now putting um, RFID tags at a very minimum, or even a smart sensor into their product if they've got high value product for maintenance issues. So, if you've got a product out in the field and it breaks down, you can actually talk to it and fix, and you may not be able to fix it, but you can diagnose it and send the parts. That's being done today. So, the more you've got a smart product, the more you can be part of industry 4 at the product level, right? So you can actually make your product smart enough that it actually is serviceable remotely, or you can be talked down by an expert, or it'll diagnose itself, which it does, right? So the more you put into the product in terms of its industry 4 connectivity, the more it's useful to the customer. That that's that's one aspect. How do you make the product part of industry 4, and also how do you talk to the supplier to make sure that your product design is compatible with his process, which I think is an old problem anyway. I mean, it's an ongoing problem. Can you make this stuff? Is this the lowest cost solution? Is my design the lowest cost solution? Always, right? Or the most reliable solution? May not be cost, it might be quality or whatever. Those are eternal questions that should always be asked. Well, I can, otherwise I'll give you what you want, but you won't like the answer in terms of price, right?
Right.
you know,
Uh,
or they no bid
good.
it, or some weird, they bid it, but it's high price, and it's because, and you have to go in and ask, well, why is the price high? Well, you want this tolerance. Oh, I didn't really need that tolerance. Well, why did you ask for it then? If you'd known in advance what the limits were, then and a good supplier would obviously help you with this, and that's part of what they're good at if they're a good supplier, but not always. So anyway, I think to do differently is to make your product industry 4 compatible. And that always sells well, right? Make it smart.
Good deal. Thank you. Um, let's see. George has an environmental question. Go for it, George.
Yeah, hi. Hey, I love this talk. It was great.
Thank you.
So I heard last week they said China built 60 coal-fired plants last year. That's
Yeah.
5 a week, 5 a month. During our heyday in manufacture, we left a lot of toxic waste and things behind, and a lot of that went over to China. So my question is, are there any industries or things that are over in China now that you don't want to come back only because of the environmental? Hey, leave the bad environmental things over there in China.
Yeah, well, that's always a trend. I mean, I mean, I, I, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think the products that come back have to be designed so they're not environmentally dangerous. That's one thing. And also we can be we can be better at the environmental management than not so much China. They've moved a long way, by the way. They've got pretty good controls now. It's almost as hard to build a paint line in China now as it is here, with the regulations they've put in. But if you go to Vietnam, or I think of Africa, I mean, what's really scaring me, if we let this global manufacturing game carry on, it's going to be Africa that's going to be competing, right? And those guys are, as you know, they have no controls on their safety. So it's good business to take manufacturing back. And if you make dirt in your own backyard, you'll clean it up a lot quicker than if it's in somebody else's backyard. So I don't think we should be scared of bringing stuff back, but we should be aware that, you know, there's some bad things that we gave away that we need to bring back better. But you know, technology being what it is, that's what you do. So, you know, I wouldn't switch back on coal-fired, you know, coal-fired energy plants to bring manufacturing back. I'd want to build nuclear plants, right? You know, so we got work to do the right things, but that's the game. That's part of the game. I think it's going to take a long time to bring the materials back. I think we can bring a lot of products back, but we've spent 30 years giving this stuff away, and you're not going to get it back in 3. It'll take a while, right? And we got a chance. I think we got a chance now, with our you know, with our thinking, our industrial thinking. I'll go back to where I was. So yeah, go ahead and take a look at these. I'll make sure, Don, that you've got everything. I'll send it to you in PDF, and these will be hot links you can get at in the PDF.
Fantastic.
All right.
Good deal.
So summarizing what TBM's about, I mean, obviously I've talked through these things. There's 3 legs to the stool. There's three parallel imperatives. The first one is government's got, if you're going to take back manufacturing, you're going to have government support to do it. And you're going to have a level playing field for your government policies. And in the US right now, I think you're going in the right direction, definitely. You know, certainly going in the right direction. You got to make sure you do it right. Canada has not been going in the right direction. We're going to change that real quick when the new government is coming in. There's a lot of issues in Europe right now. Germany's losing the plot. They used to be a powerhouse in manufacturing. Their government's really screwed them up. So government's important. That's one pillar. The other one is education. We need to re-educate. We need an integrated industrial learning system. We've got engineers leaving college with no practical experience. Doesn't work. We need apprenticeships. You know, I'm a product of the apprenticeship system, the old British apprenticeship system, and we need education and training to be balanced as a learning system. And you need education, training, and experience to be integrated. Our kids, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and then industry. So let me go through, first of all, the 3 things, and then the third thing is industry improvements, which I'll cover separately. So the first one is government. We've had very unresponsive national governments. You know, they've not been interested in manufacturing for quite some time. You know, they believed that, you know, they were going to offshore everything. That's how they thought. And they used free trade to do that. And, you know, they've been fixated on multilateral solutions, giving away our manufacturing. They've been reliant on free trade and global economies, more concerned about who we are and how we're doing. And that's changing. You know, that is changing in the Western world. People are moving more towards national thinking, and you know, TBM is basically what the byword is now. I mean, we've been talking about this for a decade, and now it's coming true. You know, we were wrong to move away from manufacturing. So governments are getting it. They are getting it. The educational system. If you look at most of our school system, the current environment is we send our kids to school and then try to find them a job. And the way it should be is we should place them in industry so they can follow a career, and then they receive focused learning along the way. And that's very doable. Germans have had that system since the end of the Second World War. Britain had it in the 60s and 70s and lost it in the 80s. And it's about integrating your industrial learning system, even starting in high school. So you counsel them in high school. There's an induction system. There's basic training. They join the workforce as apprentices, and they end up having a great career. They end up as engineers, scientists, whatever, but their work term is embedded in their educational system. So our universities need to stop the campus stuff and let students get into industry and business, not just engineering, but you know, accounting. You know, every single job needs to have an integrated approach to learning, and that's what we need to change. So that's a big deal, and a lot of educators get it. You know, some of the colleges, one of the colleges I was teaching at has that system now, where they have co-op environments very early in the program. And a lot of the students are actually tied to an industry when they start their education. But it takes a long time to change the environment of education. But that's one do differently, so that we end up with kids um, getting into industry earlier and becoming smarter at what they do, and getting more experience before, it's too late when they're 25 and they took a master's degree, but they can't even use the basic tools of their profession.
Can I make a comment, Nigel?
I thought you might, Ron. Yeah.
Okay. What you're talking about is where you have something like a 20% academic learning and 80% task-based learning. And I like to use the term task-based because some countries, your country you're from, and like Finland and Austria, and that they have a dual system. They have the university system, but they also have the apprentice system where you go through the academic and task-based learning for a career, and it works very, very well.
I guess I could use my own. If you read my book, which by the way, is $8 on Amazon. I go through my career. The reason I did that in the book is because I'm a product of that integrated system. I started as an apprentice at 16, and high school, at school I was counseled. I joined the aerospace industry. I could have joined the automotive industry or the power industry. It was the aerospace industry in my hometown at 16. I was at day release. One day a week I went to school, and one evening I went to school for the first 2 years. And then I was a sandwich course student, 6 months in the industry, learning all kinds of different stuff, actually being very productive, and 6 months at a university. The university was structured so that we never had time off. We went from university, 6 months time in university, straight back into our industry. So we never left. We were paid all the way through. We had a paycheck all the way through this thing. And so we qualified in 4 years as an engineer. So I started at 16. I did a technician program until I was 18, 2 years. And 18, I qualified at 21 as an engineer with, guess what? 16 to 21, 5 years experience. Right. So not only was I qualified at 21, I had 5 years industry experience. The average kid now at 21, they haven't even finished, and they have no experience. So that's the difference. Ron, does that help? That kind of summarizes it, right?
Yeah, I went a different course, which I had to round myself out, because when I took up engineering, we had projects in school and that, but I was working at the same time in my father's manufacturing facility, actually building tools, dies, fixtures, and running the parts through the presses. So I was earning my way through school by working for Dad, but that really gave me the basics to manufacturing technology, which I could never get from my education. It never didn't exist anywhere in my area for
Yeah.
manufacturing
Yeah. The
in that
British system. Yeah,
area.
the British system was totally integrated, and it was very well put together. The German system was the same. But that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you end up with overeducated and under trained and under experienced people. And also, even mature students can go back through this system. You can take people out of the workforce, give them one day a week, send them to night school, and upgrade them. So it doesn't have to just be new starts. It can be your existing workforce as well. And so that's the stuff we're going to have to do if we want our manufacturing back.
As a consequence or a benefit in the U.S. and in Canada, since I had worked in both, the best engineers I must say came out of the UK and out of Germany, who I worked with. They were the best because they were trained in that in the task-based apprenticeship program.
Yeah, we were pretty good at drinking beer too, if you remember.
Well, I didn't want to say anything about that.
Yeah. Okay, so the other issue is that even though all this is great stuff, manufacturing has an image problem. It's deemed to be dark, dirty, dangerous, deafening, and difficult and smelly. You know, if we want our our next generation to go into manufacturing, we have to talk a lot more about things like Industry 4 and all the neat stuff that we're doing technologically to excite them. And you know, it isn't like that. Every time I talk to marketing people, they want to put smokestacks in the picture. There's no smokestacks in hardly any industries anymore. They all look like that, right? So we got to make manufacturing cool. We got to make it sexy. We got to make sure that we build a maker culture and excite the next generation to be in manufacturing. And it's not hard to do. We just got to do it right. And if they're involved early in their career, they will get the message, and it will change the image of manufacturing. But you know, it's fair. You know, manufacturing has got a bad rap because it was a bad rap. I mean, you know, if you got laid off, if your father got laid off from manufacturing, you're not going to want to go in manufacturing yourself. So we got a generation gap of disenchantment with manufacturing. We got to build that back. And so the image, you need a spin job on manufacturing to get it to be a cool place to go again. So that's got to be part of this part of the game too. So the last one is industry. Of course, we got to run the numbers on our supply chain strategies. Okay, we need to focus on lean productivity. Industry 4 execution is going to be a massive undertaking combined with lean. We also need our local community to be re-engaged. You know, every small town I've been through most of them when I was consulting. Every small town in North America had a manufacturing site that paid probably 40% of the population, and they closed, and your small town collapsed. So we got to build that community engagement back up by making sure when we put these new plants in place, we know where the people are, that they can be supported, or will support that local community environment. Also immigration, and certainly in Canada, we've overextend ourselves on immigration. We have to manage immigration because there will be, quite frankly, more jobs required than we've got people for quite some time. And you know, redeploying people from the public sector, which is bloated in both countries, and moving them back into value-added jobs in the industrial sector is probably part of the game as well. So um, those are the three things to do to bring manufacturing back. Government needs to get their act together. The educational system needs to support well, and industry needs to be very focused on its improvement strategies. Okay. Next is energy. You know, it was mentioned earlier about coal-fired, you know, coal burning energy systems. We need nuclear power. It's probably the only way you can't manufacture with wind and solar. Okay, sorry, you can't do it. It's not reliable enough. There's not enough density. So what's pretty clear when we study it is that nuclear power, if you want clean energy, that is the way to go. Yes, you can bridge it with gas. You know, there's no question but the journey is towards nuclear. It's the only solution that provides the reliability and density of power necessary for a manufacturing facility. And we also need to get existing energy strategies to the right place with pipes. So Canadian government's not been good at doing that. That's getting changed with the new government we're bringing in. But quite frankly, no net zero. You know, I don't think this is not a personal statement. It's a fact of discussion that we're going to find out very quickly that we've been on the wrong track with, you know, wind and solar and renewables. They just aren't going to cut it. We're going to have more scientific discussion. Probably go to nuclear, cleaner fossil fuels, and we're going to need a rethink on our energy systems if we're going to get manufacturing back. So yeah, you know, drill baby drill may make sense, but the journey is still getting to a prosperity factor with cleaner energy, and that's going to have to be part of the strategy too. I'll keep going. I think I'm about out of time, right?
You're good. I'm Nigel. I do want to do a real quick introduction
Okay.
to and I'd love for you to stay on for that too.
Okay, I'll finish. I'll
local
finish. I won't be
manufacturer.
long. Another
Okay,
10 maybe, or 10 minutes probably.
No worries.
So
Take your time.
this is sort of where we are with USMCA. You know, the concept of the USMCA or NAFTA before that was move away from global free trade and get, you know, more control, more local regional trade blocks. And so, you know, in the book I talk about, you know, going to USMCA on steroids, if you will, and having a very strong, focused, and balanced trade environment between the three countries, because there's a lot of synergy between the three countries. And you know that's going to require a good working coalition of government activities, and we've not done that well. It's been off the record. I know I'm Canadian, but we've been you know, Trump's correct. We've been a little bit you know, slow in doing our part. Both countries, both Mexico and Canada, have been sort of, you know, freewheeling a little bit, you know, not pulling our weight. So there needs to be some adjustments to that. You know, obviously the best trade block environment will be where everything's on our side, on onshore, and we're still bringing in materials where we need to, or even adding value to the materials offshore, but that would be for non-indigenous materials and product only, things we will never want to do ourselves, you know, or we cannot do ourselves. And there's not that many. There's not that many things we couldn't, even a lot of the crops that are grown offshore with our climate range between Canada and Mexico could be grown here if it was strategic enough. So, you know, yeah, there will be some trade outside of the USMCA, but not much. We can grow, mine, and make far more of what we consume, okay, and be self-sufficient. And there's been studies on that, and a North American continent could do pretty much everything it needs onshore, pretty much, right? Does it make sense? Well, you know, politics being what they are, but yes, it does. Here's a little bit of a history lesson of where we've been. Uh, I think that one of our issues between us and between USA and Canada is our leadership needs to change. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but the guy on the right's already resigned, and we're just waiting for the political journey to be undertaken to get him out of here. So, you know, we're working on that right now. So, we will have a new government in Canada by the summer for sure, the way it's going. And I was wanting to explain the trade balance numbers. And this is actually, you know, the details of the GDP, the USMCA trade environment between US, Canada, and Mexico. You won't have to understand all these numbers. I'll summarize. So, you know, what Trump's upset about is that 250 million deficit that he says we're both ripping him off on. And he's right. I mean, it's not in balance. And the point to make is that it's only 1% of the GDP of the US. And yes, it's between 5 and 10% of the. It's a big number for Canadian and Mexicans to change, and that's the argument that's going on right now. But when you start looking at the other imports and exports from foreign non-USMCA environments, is 3.5 times more. So yeah, if we're ripping the US off between Canada and Mexico, then the rest of the world is ripping us off big time, all of us, because it's negative across all three countries. So the real target area is to reshore everything to the USMCA, and then maybe do some stuff between the countries to make sure we've got more balance. So the real target is stuff outside of USMCA, in our opinion. Not that we shouldn't be looking after our borders and making sure we keep our our defense spending in the right place, so that we're equally being partners on the deal for USMCA. And that's Trump's point. He's right. So and the other thing to know is that Canada and Mexico are far more dependent than the US on the USMCA environment. You know, we got massive amounts of our trade, of our business is actually in the US. So all three economies are very intertwined and integrated. In fact, some states and provinces are very dependent on each other. You know, maybe the percentage overall is 1%, but in some states, in some of the northern states, there's a significant amount of trade activity would be very detrimental to tariff that. So, you know, we've got a lot of common interests, and we need, but I agree we need to rebuild the relationship, and some of that can be done with government change, and make a deal and focus on a strong and true USM trade bloc. It means stopping trading outside of the trade bloc more and doing more stuff within the trade bloc, and that's not what we've done well. So, you know, a true trade bloc, I put Greenland in there just to keep Trump happy. But you know, I mean, he's making a lot of good points. He's dealing harshly, and he's dealing in his way. But underneath it all, you know, if you look at the signal instead of noise, he's right. We aren't keeping our end up. We need to do more. So here's an action list that, you know, by the way, Ron and me are involved in consulting our government to be on some of these things. So we are getting some degree of traction with government. But everybody, the three countries need to reach a new deal. It's good for everybody, I think, if we do it properly. I'll avoid duplicate trade deals outside of the USMCA. You know, start focusing on trade only in the USMCA. Focus on trade and capital reshoring back as an initiative. Make that a measurement. Align policies on trade, energy, and immigration so that they make sense. Canada's job, make sure our government is more aligned with the US government. Participate far more in North American continental border control, security, and defense. We've not been doing our part. And focus on levering resources. We have a lot of commitment between the countries on resources in terms of oil and gas and so on. And we need to make sure that's in place and being done properly. And Mexico, there's a few more issues with Mexico. They got to participate far more in the North American continental border control. But they also got to focus on leveraging resource advantages. And they've got some trade issues that need to be curtailed. You know, they're a backdoor for China, and they've got to stop being that. So there's a lot going on. If you know, there's a lot. I don't know how much you study, you know, the discussions, but the USMCA must work, and it must be much more tighter. And you know, Trump's right. You know, and yeah, I don't know about the 51st state. It's a good idea. Some of us might agree with it, by the way. Not everybody's against it. But most of us think of ourselves, most Canadians, I don't know whether you know this, but most Canadians think of themselves as North Americans first, and Canadians are very close second. Yeah, that's where we are. And you know, on cars, lumber, and energy, there's a range of misnomers. You know, energy products, we're connected at the hip on energy products. The other stuff, you can argue whether you need each other or not, but on energy products, we need each other for quite some decades to come. So that's kind of the summary of the trade relationship. So Trump's got some valid points. Canada does need to do stuff differently, certainly Mexico as well. And we need government to get back, you know, we need to start getting back to a USMCA environment. Don, I've got a bit more, but I can stop here if that's what you want me to do.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so the last thing is, you know, this is a list of the things the new national government should do, and this is actually from our sort of our consultancy to our government. There's a lot of you know, government needs to start learning things like why lean's so important to our businesses and support it. You know, why Industry 4 is important. You know, we've got an industrial investment challenge. There's a lot of need for money to be spent on industry on both sides of the border. You know, we talked about tax advantages earlier in the conversation. All these things need to be put in place so that, you know, our inventors and our business leaders and our entrepreneurs can get at it, you know, get it done. And so, there's a lot of supply chain practices that we need to manage. I think people are beginning to realize, not everybody, but some people are beginning to realize how expensive supply chains are if they're long. So we need to cut the waste out. Even our local supply chains are wasteful. We got stuff that crosses the border between Canada and the US 5 times to make something. Right, Ron? In the automotive sector.
Yeah, you're correct on that. I mean, I seen it. I worked at General Motors. I saw that all the time. It was very
Yeah.
wasteful.
You buy the materials in the US, they come north, we fabricate them, they go south for plating, they go north again for assembly, they go south for some kind of treatment, they go north again. That's crazy stuff, right?
Yeah.
So even between us, there's some supply chain management practices need to be improved. So, that government should know that stuff. Government should be saying, you guys crazy? No wonder it's costing you're not competitive. So what we're saying is everybody needs to start understanding the cost of supply chains. The fact we bring them home is one step, but second step is let's make sure they work, because they're totally a waste. I mean, you're not paying for the supply chain; you're paying for the product, right? The other thing is we waste a lot of a lot of resources by throwing it away. So the other thing you can't do with long supply chains is a circular economy. You can't send stuff back. We tried sending stuff back to China and they didn't want it, right? I got a big story on that if you want it, but we used to send stuff back in 40-foot containers, and rubbish and plastic waste and so on, and they didn't want it back. So if you've got a local supply chain, then you can actually use the circular economy. And this is big business. I mean, this is when you can recycle stuff real well, not just at the consumer level, but in the manufacturing space as well. So there's a whole initiative of sustainability associated with the circular economy. So if you're interested in that topic, there's a lot of need for inventors in this product space. I think there's going to be a lot of market here for products that fit in that space, that help with the recycling process. So the economists are getting it. I've been fighting with economists for a decade because they've all been free traders, right? So now they're being reorientated, and we've now got some major economists beginning to realize that we should move from financialization, consumerism, and globalism to production, work, and localism. So there's a huge, not only are we been preaching to the business people, they need to think about economics differently, but the economists are changing their mind too. We're getting more friends in the economic circles because they've always been free traders, send it offshore. So lean thinking is going to win. We were losing with long supply chains. Now we're winning. The other thing is, if you want to get into the sort of geopolitical world, we fit right in because I don't know if you know this, but between inside of the USMCA, we have the most vibrant, youngest, most capable new consumers in the globe. China's getting old. Europe's got, blown itself up. North America could be the New World Order is fracturing. We know that we're going to have to bring stuff home from security reasons, never mind about, cost reasons. But North America's got a huge advantage. We got a young workforce, young consumer base, a good installed expert base, good science, good learning, theoretically, bit of work to do, and theoretically good stable politics. So we can be rich as a continent if we work together. And this is what this guy's saying. So if you want to buy the book, there's a link. All that stuff I've been talking about is in the book. And I'll give you this additional information. Everything I've got, I'm on Substack, so I've got a lot of articles I keep writing on Substack. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can join my group, my LinkedIn group and my Facebook group, but it's all on my website. So if you go to NigelSouthwayAuthor.com, even my Substack is linked there. So you can get everything from my website. So I'll leave you with that link. That's it.